Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons for another Earthworks podcast, and today we are celebrating an entire year of podcasts. As I have said maybe more than once on our podcast series, we started this over a year ago now. Because we didn't know what to do when COVID hit, and we wanted to share information, and we wanted to be able to stay in communication with everybody in the industry. So we decided to start the podcast, and Jack started the podcast, our very first podcast, with Josh Saunders. So today we're going to interview Josh, both Jack and I separately, and have a little reunion. The podcast has been incredibly successful. We've had over 50 podcasts recorded, some wonderful conversations with a lot of great superintendents like Josh Saunders, and a lot of good consultants like our friend Dave Wilbur and Lawrence Mayhew, who has produced some of the very best podcasts for us. So if you haven't been a member of the podcast team, I encourage you to join us, to subscribe, and we're looking forward to recording yet another year of podcasts as we move into year 2021. So here's Josh Saunders with me and Jack Higgins. Mr. Saunders, we are very happy to have Josh Saunders with us again today, and Jack Higgins and I are both going to talk to you in some fashion during today's podcast, but we wanted you back so much because you were our very first podcast a year ago right now. And I know you've talked to Jack a little bit about this, but I think I'm going to ask you some of the same questions. As you know, last year at this time was just a mess. I mean, we were all kind of scattered. So you had only just gotten to Lancaster Country Club a year ago, what now? When you got there in January or November a year ago?
I had been there 2 years. So I started in February of 19.
So I'm completely off. All right. So my time schedule is bad, but you were getting into the swing of things.
Right.
So last year at this time, I mean, just to share with everybody what was going on, COVID hit, and as the fearless leader of Earthworks, I remember vividly it was March 13th, Friday the 13th. I had just come off an airplane for the last time in over a year. And I'm sitting here wondering, what are we going to do as a business? And Jack and I were talking, and we said, let's start maybe doing some things that we can get information out to folks. And we decided to do a podcast, and the first name that came up was Josh Saunders, of course. And so Jack called you and recorded the very first podcast. And I will tell you that since that time, we have now done over 50 podcasts, mostly with superintendents, a lot of consultants. But you're the first invitee of Superintendent World that has been asked to come back to join us. And I would like to throw out a little accolade. You're in the middle of a pretty busy season. And as you can see by the sign behind you, welcome to the lake.
Right.
You actually took a couple of days off to go visit your mom for Mother's Day. And I think that's just fantastic. I mean, there's not enough guys that are doing that, but congratulations.
Well, thanks. I think we all have to do that. I mean, especially after the last year we endured. We all have our unique stories. I went an entire year without seeing my entire family from Christmas to last Christmas, and haven't seen Mom again since this past Christmas. And we're all vaccinated up now. So
there you go.
We put out the last sod truck earlier in the week, and from a pretty major project. So I wanted to take advantage of the weather and shoot down and spend Mother's Day with her. But
I think that's fantastic. Like you said, everybody. I mean, one of the things, and we've been talking a lot about this on the podcast, but one of the things that, I think is very important for everybody to remember that, family does have to come first. And, and accolades to
absolutely
you for taking the trip. And you actually, what was it, a 3-4 hour drive for you yesterday?
It's about 5.5 hours.
Oh, even longer.
Yeah, I left right after work, got on the road, got here about midnight, and she was waiting up with a big old smile on her face. So
of course she was. She's your mom. She better
right.
be. you know.
It's a lot better than the looks I used to get getting home at midnight.
Well,
So
yeah,
that's
exactly. With the whip in the hand and the stick that's going to hit you in the back of the head, and
absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah, wondering what that smell is on your breath at that age,
Hmm.
right? We all
Yep,
have those
you got it.
stories. We all
You
have
got
those
it.
stories of such. I remember one with my mother where I told her I had the flu and I was sick for 2 days. And then finally I fessed up, told her what really had happened. And ever since then, she never took care of me a day in my life again. Anytime I was sick, I could have walked in with a bleeding arm and she would have said I was just out drinking or something. So, but
Yeah, the good old.
thank God you're there with mom.
Yep, yep.
So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing. I mean,
Okay.
Lancaster Country Club is gonna be hosting a pretty big event coming soon, right? What's the story?
Yeah, we're hosting the 2024 Women's Open. So, a few things have started in the works leading up to the Open, but this was just more of a club-wide, project. It's very exciting. It's a really exciting time at Lancaster. I kind of use the reference that they're modernizing. They're building this new facility and moving the pool, and the facility is going to have a gym. It's going to have a kids
Yeah.
zone. It's going to have more of a casual dining feel. It's going to have golf simulators. So, you're kind of opening yourself up to an entire different generation. Um, you know, I reference it too that it's making us more relevant. It's becoming a one-stop shop. A family, the age group of my age can get off work, they can grab the kids and they can go, and mom or dad can work out, or mom and dad can hit balls while the kids in the kids zone, and then they can rendezvous and have dinner, and then they're on their way home. So it's a very exciting time for the club. The project is going well. Obviously, with this big of a magnitude of the project, it's been a lot of challenges. We definitely took advantage of COVID and tried to sandwich a multi-year project into, basically 12 months.
Right.
But it's going well. On our side of things, we just wrapped up. We completely redid the driving range in-house.
Yeah.
And then our friends at Motton helped with redoing the driving range tee. We put in a artificial tee mat on the backside, and then where the old pool was located, they tore down the pool, obviously buried it back, and we put in a 14,000 square foot putting green that's rolling into the first tee. In conjunction with that, over the winter, we took down, probably anywhere from 50 to 60 trees throughout the panoramic view off the clubhouse. And it's just, it's really all coming together, and it's really exciting. It's good stuff.
It is quite spectacular. I mean, I got a chance to, I don't know how far back, a couple months back now, I guess I got to drive
Mm-hmm.
around with you, and they were working on that whole facility. It's amazingly big. I mean,
Right.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, and thank God golf as a whole is starting to really kind of take a new seat in people's lives. And what you guys have done, like you said, it's bringing an opportunity to really make this a family event. And
Well,
we're seeing that across the country.
I think that's one of the, and this sounds so bad to say, Joel, so don't hold it against me, but
Go
like,
ahead.
if there is one huge positive of COVID, it's golf.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, and I don't think anyone's going to deny that. And you're even still seeing it now,
Yeah.
like less people are booking vacations, less people are doing stuff because they're more, they're making their life centered around being outdoors and enjoying, something that's easily accessible for them.
And
And
being close to home.
right. And we're reverting back to what I grew up in. And, a country club was kind of your scapegoat.
Yeah.
It was almost your second home where you felt safe.
Yeah.
And, I think that's one of the great benefits. Now, obviously in our seats, it also, creates unknown, and we're a little worried because can we continue the trend of the rounds we had last year? I was talking to Brandon yesterday on the drive down from Overbrook. He's forecasting to do over 30,000
Yeah.
rounds this year.
I talked to him the other day. He's getting hammered.
And you think of that acreage and like, oh my gosh. And, luckily I have a pretty big property and I can spread it out over 27 holes. But, so it's almost like we're going to also have to retrain ourselves a little bit and how to do things, and obviously load up on a bunch of earthworks products in those high traffic
Well, that
areas.
goes without saying, of course. That's a lot
Just
of lot,
saying.
lot of stress on those properties. You know what? So you've been doing this now 20 some years in the professional side. What do you think the outlook's going to be? Do you think we can sustain this momentum?
I, d- I do. I mean, I think it's hard to truly pinpoint that answer right now. I think we're going to have the repercussions of COVID for years to come.
Yeah,
I think we all are aware of that, both economically and just well-being,
yeah,
right? So like with that being said, I see the trend continuing definitely over the next couple years. So like, Jack and I talked about it the other night. Is it referencing back to the whole tiger boom? That's right when I was coming out of college. I was debating between landscape architecture or becoming a superintendent. And the only reason I was thinking landscape architecture, and Joel, you know me, I didn't want to be in school for 6 years uh,
right,
unless it involved a lot of those mornings of the flu that you referenced with your mom.
right.
Um, so for me, I think the trend's going to continue. I think it's going to be a lot like the tiger boom stretch, where we're going to go multiple years and then we kind of see how it plays out. And look, the other cool thing is like, look what just happened at the Masters.
Yeah,
When you get
exactly.
someone like Hideki winning, you're bringing in other
The
cultures.
world.
It's yeah, worldwide. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a very, very exciting time for golf. Really do.
What do you think? I mean, one of the big rags on our industry, certainly internally, was golf was always pulling in the revenue, but F&B was kind of dragging everything down. Will that
Right.
change? I mean, you guys have made a huge change on your property, and obviously it's focused around bringing the families into
Hmm.
the property, and F&B is obviously food and beverage is a part of that. I can't tell you how many guys I've talked to, a couple that you and I know well recently that were saying, because of COVID, nobody came to the clubhouse. And so, the food and beverage part of it wasn't losing money. And in fact, the club made a ton of money because there wasn't a whole lot of revenue being lost on that side of things. And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just looking at
Hmm.
the overall health of the business. But it sounds like you guys at Lancaster Country Club have kind of brought back this model of bringing all the country club pieces back together, and obviously golf is going to lead that with the work that you're doing. We'll talk about that here in a second.
Right.
What's the outlook
Uh,
on the big picture of the country club scene?
oh, I think everyone obviously has a unique story of what transpired over the last year, right? But,
Yeah,
for us, yeah, we took a little hit, but mainly from the banquet and the wedding standpoint.
right,
Our membership really came together and supported us with takeout and carry out. And there was this whole new realm that's never happened with the club before, that was created because you couldn't come indoors. Um, so I see that trend continuing. And as restrictions lifted, you kind of go back to what I just stated, and the club was considered like the escape and the safe zone. So
right.
we actually got really busy really fast because of it. And I think that trend's going to continue. I mean,
Good.
would you rather go to a club that there's 300 members that you probably know 75% of it, or would you rather go to a restaurant downtown and the unknown?
Yeah.
And I think, just in my opinion, what I've experienced, I think that trend will continue. Definitely.
I hope that I can say I agree with you, and I think I do agree with you. And the neat thing is that a lot of these clubs have really developed levels of community, and I think
Hmm.
that's where it's going to really take on. I mean, clearly, golf is just exploding, and I'm talking to
Yep.
people in my community that never played golf in their life, and
Right.
now they're hooked. And
Yep.
and once you're hooked, I mean, you know it better than anybody, living golf your whole life.
Yep.
But once you're hooked, I mean, it's a game that you'll play and forever. I mean, it really is. I mean, I talk to a lot of guys in my little community, and they're in their 80s and 90s, and they still love getting out and hacking the ball around. I mean, they've been doing it since they were kids, and it's a great way to get outside. But
Hmm.
it's amazing. And we were thrilled to see golf explode the way it did, because nobody expected, especially a year ago, sitting here now, we were all wondering if we were even going to have a job. You guys were closed for a while as an industry for at least a couple months, and then
Hmm.
thank goodness everybody realized, wait a second, we could be outside and really having a good time with this whole thing. Let's
It was definitely a period that you want to forget, but you'll never forget.
Right,
I think
exactly.
it's absolute best way to describe it.
A
So
lot of
much
us
uncertainty,
A lot
so
of us
much
are calling it. A
unknown.
lot of us are calling 2020 the lost year, but I think from a golf standpoint, it really isn't. It's the found year.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah,
Good.
absolutely. Once you got away from the unknown and still the challenges that we had to deal on a daily basis, and you saw that golf was striving, it was actually kind of exciting. It really was. And
Yeah.
you left the property and everything was such gloom and doom. No one was
Right.
out. You drove home from work and no one was out. No one was doing anything. So being on the golf course for those 10, 12 hours was actually exciting because you actually saw faces. Even if you
Yeah.
weren't interacting with them, you
Yeah.
saw people. There was life. So that was
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you guys were a lot more fortunate than certainly I was. I mean, I got stuck in a 10 by 10 box, but we started doing the Earthworks podcast, so we stayed busy. In fact, found ourselves very busy, but did not have, the social interaction that we were used to by going out to visit people like you. Although you and I did have a chance to catch up a few times,
Yeah.
even snuck around the COVID thing, but for the most part, a lot of us on this side of the desk didn't really get out. But thank God you guys as a golf course community, you stayed working, your guys were there, you stayed busy. I mean, it almost passed time as, in a different spectrum than what a lot of us were doing when we literally were home for a year,
Right.
I mean, that I've never been home for a year. I mean, I'm not sure it was a good thing or a bad thing. I would probably tell you my wife might think it's not the best thing, but that's a whole different story. But let's talk about your golf course, because it's such a spectacular
Yep.
property. And again, you've been working on this for a couple of years, getting ready for the Open. It really is. I remember being with you very early on, when I hope you don't mind me telling the story, but I remember the first time I went to see you at Lancaster. I think you had interviewed in the winter, and we were riding around just as POA was coming out, and I think your comment to me was, if I'd known there was this much POA, I probably wouldn't have taken the job. But knowing you as well as I do, I also know that this will be your focus. And so
Yep.
what's the report on POA now, after a couple of years of working this? And I know you've been working very diligently. How's it going?
It's still there
It's
and
still there.
lots of it.
Yeah. But it's a
Yeah. I
lot
mean,
better. I mean, the last time I saw you, it
yeah.
was significantly better, my friend.
Well, I think for the first 2 years, my focus was really on playing surfaces,
Yeah.
to limit and reduce, utilize programs, utilize practices to really reduce the populations. And now going into 2021, we're going to shift gears and start getting outside of those playing surfaces, kind of taking an inside the ropes approach. Um, yeah, you're exactly right. I remember to this day calling Pete, and Pete
Pete
Went, who I
Wentz, yeah.
worked for the longest time. And I mean, I was at tears. I was in tears,
I remember
just
that.
overwhelmed. And,
Yeah.
so it was, what am I going to do? Can I do a rough renovation? Should I do a rough renovation? And then more people that I trusted, that I talked with, they just kind of talked me off a ledge, so to speak. And, realizing that I have a great old property and let's
Yes, you
utilize
do.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's take care of it and reduce what you can, with understanding that you're never going to get rid of all of it.
Right.
So we're taking some approaches. We're going to be aggressive starting this year, going after the POA, especially in the rough, because here's the thing: if you can't reduce and prevent in the rough, you're
It's going to
just
be everywhere.
encouraging into the playing surfaces. And I don't care how good you are, it's going to happen. I mean, I came from arguably the POA capital of the world in Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
and so I'm very familiar with it. And we're going to start a lot earlier. We're going to start our member guest or invitational is late June, and we're going to get to work right on the Monday after that. And instead of closing down nines, we're going to take the approach of going to highly populated areas and really getting after it early, Really trying to get seed in there early before you're just encouraging the POA that's already in the seed bed to rejuvenate itself and come back. And, that's the debate. I mean, we've had this conversation a lot of times, is when is the right time to seed? When's the right time to disturb a seed bed, especially 100-year-old property in the Northeast that has POA everywhere? There's no right answer to it, right?
No, there isn't.
So, now luckily there's some advances out there that's going to help our cause.
Do you
And
mind
I'm
sharing
going to
us your
plan on
strategy?
utilizing.
What's the battle plan, if you don't mind sharing that?
Well, it's still kind of one of those things I don't really know.
Right.
I'm going to do whatever I can to find what the best recipe that works. I think I often say this when asked. We're agronomists first, true and true. We're public relations, that is. But I also think we're artists and mad scientists. So it's going to be finding the best concoction that works. And I'm definitely going to play around with POA Cure now that that's out on the market. I have a bunch of
Careful.
Exonerate in the tool shed. Yep. So I'm going to, push the envelope to see what works. And, I think that's what makes us successful. If I've been doing this a long time, and one of the biggest things I took from my years at Kinlock is what not to do.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand that mentality and taking it. Luckily, I have a good team behind me, two great assistants that were with me in Pittsburgh. They understand my mindset. They know I wanna go hard and go strong, but they're definitely there to pull me back when Josh is getting a little.
That's what a
You
good
know what I mean?
assistant is
So
supposed to do,
yeah,
right?
that's exactly what they're there for.
Pull the boss back in
You
and
got it.
rein him down when he starts wanting to do crazy things, which
I
is
mean,
cool.
if you could bleep me, I could tell you all the stories I have
No,
of my
let's not
years
do
with
that.
Ken Lock, but
Yeah.
you know where I'm going.
Yeah. I met you back in the days of Kinlock when you were
Yep.
working for Pete Wend. And
Hmm.
yeah, those were some interesting times. And obviously a property that was that new, radically different environment than what you're going into. Now let's talk a little bit about Lancaster. It's one of my favorite architects design, William Flynn,
Hmm.
who has
Yep.
done some great stuff in this Lehigh Valley, Philadelphia area. Lehigh Country Club, we've had John Chassard on, and I believe Scott Anderson at Huntington Valley was just interviewed for our
Hmm.
podcast, but a wonderful Flynn design. I actually found one in Philadelphia that is claiming to be a William Flynn. And I'm going to forget the name of it, of course. But there's a bunch of Flynn stuff going on around the area, and there's some wonderful things. And you guys are involved in the Flynn Cup, which is just the
Yep.
local Flynn courses getting together.
Yep.
But I mean, seriously, a spectacular golf course that you are managing right now, which is really kind of cool. So let's talk about all the work you've done, because you're doing much of this work, I assume, for prep for the Open. Is that part of what this
Yeah.
strategy is?
Well, you have to be careful in this seat to say that. Obviously, everything I'm doing is for the membership and
Of
their
course.
experience on a daily basis. But yes,
Well
the
said.
Open is very much in the back of my mind. It's a unique role and challenge that every decision I make is not only for the present, but it's also for the future.
Yeah.
And that's something in my 26 years of doing this, and what now 10 years as a superintendent, I never really thought of before, I guess. But Lancaster, you pegged it. It's such a special place.
Yeah.
Joel, I've been very fortunate. I've been playing golf since I was 3 years old. I've had the privilege of walking, playing, and working on some of the best properties in the United States. And I put LCC up there, just from the use of topography and
Yeah.
the greens complexes and the sight lines and all the above. It's really, really a special place that sometimes I pinch myself when I say it, but if you picked it up and you put it 30 miles east, I think a lot more people would know about Lancaster Country Club than
Yeah.
already do.
Exactly.
But we've gone out with the mindset of, I inherited a great property. I mean, I don't want to ignore that. I don't want to deny that. it was in great shape. The bones were there. It just some tweaks that needed to be made. And, that's the beauty of this industry, right? Like there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and everybody's got their different input. Everybody's got their different opinion. So what I inherited, and to me, it was just improving on playability, being a golfer myself. I really placed a lot of focus on firmness and fast, utilizing the topography, which I think is what Flynn would have intended. And then I worked close with Jim Nagel, who's our architect, and kind of looking back at old aerials and, looking at what sight lines would be for our tree removal. And, we've taken out 100 plus trees in 2 years, if not more. If you know me well from the Longview days, I am
Yes.
not afraid to push
trees.
the envelope when it taking trees down. And then we combined the 11th and 15th green that looked like it was that in old aerials. We got some stuff in the works with some bunkering and reclaiming some old bunkering. Restored our 13th hole. Not necessarily restored it, but just kind of renovated to give it a little more length and character.
Was 11 and 15 it was that combination of that green, was that historical? I didn't know that. Did Jim find an aerial then?
It's kind of a debate, actually. Aerials up until like the 40s were like black and white, obviously. So you had to kind of go off of shades. And there used to be a really large tree, the service road that goes just to the right of 15 green and directly behind. There used to be a really large tree in between those two greens. And I actually have a picture, and, if I wasn't at home, I could easily show you right now, hanging right behind my desk in the office. It's an old black and white aerial. And I used to look at it almost every day. And I used to think to myself, it really looks like the mow pattern there as those two greens are combined, with a fairway in between, of course, not a complete green. And when I took the job, amongst all the things that went over in the interview process, one of the biggest things that was asked is, when I did my course tour, not only with the committee, but with the head pro and with the director of golf and GM, was this is the worst area. So much play goes through there, but it's a pinch point. It's the only place you could take a cart. It's the only place you can go. So, back in November of 2018, the first thing I said is you put bent grass there. Before I saw the first aerial, you put bent grass there. It will withstand traffic 10 times better than any kind of rough.
Right.
And, so that's what we did to reclaim it. And there's some other, I'm an historian, I'm a nut, I'm a golfer. So I'm kind of always looking at that stuff. There's some other things I'm trying to reclaim, and talking. My greens chair is a big, huge historian and architect buff too. So he gets giddy when I make those phone calls and we have those talks, which is very important in the relationship between a director and a greens chair, so no, it's exciting time, more tree removal, and then again, just continue to focus on playability.
Let's talk a little bit about your agronomy, because you and I have worked together for a long time, and you've certainly been one of the better students that I've had in terms of working biological soil management. And you and I met probably in 2004 or 5 at Kinloch. When did you get to Kinloch?
Yep.
At 4?
I got there 04. I was in Augusta, and 05 is when I started at Kinloch. I had my first soil first. Yep. I remember to the day meeting you.
You had at Kinloch doing a Soil First Academy.
And look, let's not sugarcoat it for all the listeners, right? Like I will never pretend to be the smartest guy in the room ever. I'm a Southern guy from small town Virginia, one stop sign type feel. So standing in that first Soil First, I was like, but to me, the best way to put it, Joel, and I've told you this thousands of times, it's simple and it makes sense to me. And I'm such a visual guy in agronomy, and I have managed so many different playing surfaces. so many different soil mediums, push-ups to sand, and no matter what other products I use to complement, you see the response in earthworks. And there is something to feeding the soil.
Yeah.
And I truly believe in that.
And that's really the subject is, is the concept of feeding the soil. I still to this day, and you've seen it a couple of times, but I still use a photograph that I may have taken with you, or you might have been with us when we took it. I think Pete's foot is in it, but it's a profile of the Kinloch green, and it's about 4 or 5 inches of a really rich humus. And I share this in classes, and I know you and I have talked about this because you did this at Longview. You turned those greens into a humus profile. But I can't tell you how many times, and I show that picture in classes to a lot of superintendents, and I say, is this good or is this bad? And it's about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 inches of what looks like organic matter. And a lot of guys' response would be, oh no, that's bad. We got to rip all that out of there. And I'm like, no, this is great. And then when you look at that picture, you look at the bottom of another 6 inches below the organic profile is a dense mass of roots. So, and I know, you and I have talked about this. You left your last job with a beautiful profile. And unfortunately, I believe it might have been mistaken as a not so good organic profile and removed. But what you guys did at Kinloch, Pete and all of you, there was a lot of you guys that we know well that went, that really worked at that profile was as to this day, 20 years later, as good a profile as I have photographed. And that's really what the concept is just creating an environment where the soil does all its work for you. And you've mastered that. And I'm sure you walked into Lancaster and it's not quite where you want it to be. And this is what, a 3, 4, 5 year process. How long were you at Longview? You were at Longview 5 years?
Started in 13, so yeah, six seasons, 5 years.
So
I think that's how we all reference it.
Yeah, you did some amazing things with the profile in that short period of time. So it's doable. So you've lived it, and again, it's all about seeing it, and you've seen it, and I'm sure you're going to be able to do the same thing at Lancaster.
I used the same picture during the interview process at Lancaster. Absolutely.
Good.
In my final interview presentation. I think I pointed out Pete's foot. Excuse me.
He had what I used to call his clown shoes. He had his clown shoes on, and I hope he's not listening. But yeah, it was back in those days, quite honestly, Josh, I was learning along with you guys because we were pushing the envelope as to how far we could go. Because quite honestly, if you look at that picture, any good superintendent would look at that and say, man, that's got to be bad. But when you live it and you see it on a daily basis and you knew how well it drained and how active it was biologically and how much it gave back in terms of moisture management and nutrient support. Nobody in their right mind that lived that like you guys did. And, you were there with a whole bunch of guys that are now great supers, Brandon Collins, and, a whole bunch of guys that are out there, Ryan, Severett at Woodmont, and just some great team that was there, and they've all seen that. And like you said, it's one of those things. I came out of a university setting and I didn't understand any of this, but I had a mentor that really helped me understand it. And when you see it, it makes sense. And that's the glory of going through this, is that you guys have seen it and you're going to be able to take it to the next property. And I didn't realize that you would use that picture in the interview. I think that's great.
Well, I think what's important, and on top of everything you said, is everybody also understanding the importance of beneficial organic matter from a wear standpoint, and I think when I interviewed at Lancaster, so many comments were made towards me, towards the greens. And, then I remember I sent you, I think I wasn't even on property yet.
Yeah,
and it was like middle of January, ground's frozen. I'm calling down and telling George and Chet to go take soil probes. And they're like, how the hell are we going to do that? And I'm like, I don't care. Figure it out. I need to make the program. And, from what I inherited to now, we've obviously built and developed some OM, and I'm in conversations with guys within network, and they're like, why in the hell are you doing that? And it's not just from the encouraging of soil biology, it's the protection of the plant from all the madness we do to them.
Yeah.
B, foot traffic, ball marks not splattering, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think you pegged it. A lot of people will look at a profile picture and be like, oh no, you got to take that out. You got to take that out. But I think we're gaining to a term where you're finding that a lot of people are being successful with scaling that back a little bit. I mean, a lot of soups in the Midwest, they're not even pulling cores anymore, right?
Yeah,
So like they're just
exactly.
solidifying away. And I think there's a trend, there's a culture that's kind of changing. That's kind of exciting. And you're right, we've been a part of it for a long time. We bought into it. I still remember to this day, my very first aerification. I had experienced aerifications at Westchester. I had experienced aerifications at Augusta, multiple courses in the Virginia when I was working. I knew from a long time, Joel, that this is what I wanted to do. So I was always paying attention. And I never will forget that first aerification and seeing Kinloch greens recover in like 7 to 8 days.
Yeah.
And just being amazed.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that, obviously happened at Kinloch is that we put an awful lot of amendments into the greens. And one of the things that we talk a lot about with construction, and we're doing so much of it, and you're going to be doing a lot of it, and Pete's doing some of it now down at Congressional. But, the most important thing is that the growing models that that our industry has kind of lived by are really counterproductive. What they do is they push so much synthetic nitrogen that they grow a massive amount of thatch, and then everybody walks away and leaves you guys with this big mat of thatch that's
right.
hard to manage. Whereas when you guys came into Kinloch, certainly by the time you got to Kinloch, a couple 4 years into into that property, there was never really that big thatch ball that they had to manage. I mean, they had that beautiful humus. I think that picture that I took was 10 years old, 10 years in. That was probably taken around 2010, 10 years into the course's history. You had been there for a while.
Yeah, I can't. It was Ryan's last summer. I remember that. So it might have been 09.
Okay,
I can't remember when he went to Old Farm.
Yeah, because I think construction started in '99, and and it was new course of the year in 2001. I believe. But yeah, it's really interesting. Josh, I want to thank you. I'm gonna turn the rest of this part over to your conversation with Jack. But again, we're looking at this as a celebratory event for the first podcast of the second year of this, and we hope to continue this because it's gotten such great following, and we're trying to provide information and help guys. Even one little tidbit is good, and it's good to be able to have a community of you guys in the industry to really share stories with, and I can't thank you enough, not only for your friendship but for your support and definitely coming on the podcast with us. So let's just put in our calendar for May 1st of 2022 that we'll have you back, and we'll make this an annual event. The first podcast of the year will be Josh Saunders, and and we'll still have some chance to talk about the Women's Open by then. So we got a couple years.
Just do me a favor, maybe send me like a reminder a week earlier so I make sure that I'm at the office and everybody actually thinks I do work.
We'll be much better by then. Every year we seem to be getting a little bit better. I'm actually going to try to build a proper studio so we can do it right and get the whole nine. I mean, it's been very good. I just think it's important to give back to the industry, and when we can share stories like yours with other folks, the feedback that we get, and we got a lot of, in fact, I think Jack probably told you this, your podcast, that very first one, continues to grow in listenership, which is kind of fun. But we're going to continue to do this.
I think, Joel, I think I could speak for a lot of the people in the industry of how valuable it was to us in a year of uncertainty. I mean, it wasn't just learning a little something, bud. It was the stories we heard throughout all the podcasts. And I mean, I was talking to Jack the other night when he was in town, and like, I've listened to the podcast with Armin maybe halfway through 3 times now, just to hear an industry legend and yourself talking and telling stories of the good old day. and hearing him telling the story of the PGA at Cherry Hills and all that, I mean, I'm rolling around in my
Yeah.
cart at work laughing out loud, and everybody's like looking at me like I'm a wacko,
Yeah.
which they already do. It's fine, but
That's all
no,
right.
I want to say thank you too. I mean, you know, a year of uncertainty. It was nice to kind of get lost when you were on the golf course working.
No,
You
that's
know,
nice, sir. That's
to
perfect.
hear for an hour, and I feel honored to be a part of the family. I feel honored to be a close friend with you and Jack, and the whole Earthworks team.
You started
I,
it all, pal. You got it all rolling,
I,
man. It wouldn't be without
I,
you. We wouldn't have. It's just like, what are we going to do? Let's call Josh. He'll take care of us.
well, you know, I'm a firm believer in what I believe in, and I believe in the product, and I'm going to believe and be here to help the team and whatever, and you know,
Well,
just do
just
that thing.
just keep the biological soil management piece in your back pocket, and you'll be fine.
You got it, buddy. You
Josh,
got it.
thank you so much. Like I said, we're
Thank
going to have
you.
you talking to Jack here as well, but we'll see you again next year on the
A-
Earthworks podcast. Thanks, Josh.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.
Hello and welcome to the Earthworks podcast. Today you have me, your host, Jack Higgins, and have the pleasure of sitting here with Mr. Josh Saunders. And if all of you Earthworks podcast listeners are thinking, Josh Saunders, he was your inaugural podcast. Yes, he was, the very first one. Josh,
That's me.
that's you.
The
Well-
one and only.
That's it, Josh Saunders. And we are so happy to have you back here right around the anniversary of the very first podcast. And we're back here with our initial guest. Thank you so much for joining us.
How crazy were those times a year ago when we did this, right?
We had no idea what was coming.
So much of an unknown.
That's it. That's it.
And now here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and we didn't know that the whole golf boom was going to happen for the rest of the
Right.
summer. Yeah, we
Right.
did this in the first week of May last year.
Yeah, no, and thanks for having me back. It's it's been a crazy year.
It sure has.
I hope everyone's made it through all right, and happy to be here.
Hell yeah, man, and here we are. So, we were talking that in it being the first podcast, we had a goal of really talking about that. In 2024, you have the Women's U.S. Open coming to Lancaster Country Club.
Yes.
And the initial idea was like, let's talk about the kind of master plan of that tournament, like how you were preparing over the long period of time. And my idea for today was to get back into how that plan is progressing.
Okay.
But we didn't really get to start with you.
Me.
Yeah, because a lot of this podcast is about telling stories, and I want to hear about how you got into this business of what we do, taking care of being the keeper of this special game. That as it turns out in
Yeah.
COVID in 2020 is a really important part of life, All of a sudden, all these places are getting 40,000 rounds a year again.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that's the best. If there was, and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but if there was one thing or the best thing that came of the last year of all of our lives, it was the rejuvenation of the game of golf. And and I think from multiple standpoints, and that people didn't have anything to do or they couldn't do anything, for lack of better words, that going out and playing golf was the choice that they made. And hopefully, dating myself back, you go back, and this is the next wave from the late 90s of the Tiger boom, right, that we all know.
Yeah,
And,
course.
And hopefully this is going to be the next stage. And I even look back to a couple weeks ago and look at who just won the Masters.
Yeah, man.
And
Yeah,
how great is that going to be for the game of golf? And
absolutely. Open it up internationally.
right. And so yeah, it's an exciting time. I think it's good. I mean, I think everybody's going to look back at the last year and they're going to point out the negatives, but in our world, I think there's some positives to it. But
So Josh, you're exactly right. We got a lot of good things to look forward to in the game of golf. We got a lot of good stuff going on, and this year in terms of everybody's play, it's going to be a lot like last year.
Right.
But what I want to get back to is more about you, man.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, so we got to hear the story of Josh.
That's it.
The story of Yosh. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of times I ask people, can you think about your first time working or something like that? But I know that as far as the golf course goes, it's been in your life for a very long time.
Forever. I mean, it's all I really ever remember. I mean, I remember my dad putting a club in my hand at a very, very young age. I can't tell you what year that was, but I remember it, and I remember playing with him and et cetera, and then it got to a point where my parents considered the golf course daycare, for a lack of better words. And, all my friends were sitting by the pool or, doing this or doing that or sleeping till 10. And, I would walk 54 holes before most kids even woke up. And,
Barefoot?
Well, backwards in the snow, of course. But I remember, as I was playing in my teens, seeing the staff working, whether they were mowing or they were making irrigation fixes or et cetera, and I came from a very small town in Southern Virginia, and it was a very mom and pop place. What they made in May, they spent in June. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
One of those kind of places, and I appreciated it. And I developed a really good relationship with the pro, and I got lessons because I picked the range, and then it turned into working on the golf course. And, that's how I got in the industry. And I knew from a very early age, at 14, 15, that this is exactly what I wanted to do. And
well, we were talking earlier too about, of course, your career really did take off at some point. But
right.
And we'll get back to your golf career. But we were talking earlier that you were also a star soccer player in your high school soccer team, which anyway, so what's cool about that is that you told me that you were really aiming for a scholarship to play probably D3 soccer somewhere, but you got hurt your senior year.
Yep.
You pictured yourself maybe working in the golf business, but more in the country golf course, mom and pop sort of place.
Right. Where I grew up, the places type of places I grew up. I mean, soccer was a huge part of my life, and I played it, and I traveled, and I did all these things, and it just got to the point where it couldn't happen anymore.
You got hurt.
I got hurt, and I wanted to keep playing, but I couldn't play, and I knew that golf all along was in the back of my mind, and that was my fallback. And now I don't regret it at all.
Yeah. So from that point, you made an initial change because you wound up going to Virginia Tech. You became a Hokie, and
right.
and you went through the VT turfgrass program.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, then your career trajectory changed from mom and pop country golf course to where you started and took off from there, Kinloch and everywhere
right.
else. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I know that Kinloch wasn't your first experience. You had internships in other places as well.
Well, I mean, like I said, I started working at Linwood at a very 15 years old, and it was mom and pop, and I got exposed to absolutely everything. I mean, I remember, I sprayed greens at 15, 16 years old. And, people can look at that in two different ways. Either A, that's a trendsetter, or B, oh my God, what am I doing, right? And I knew right then that I loved it, and that's what I wanted to do. And I worked at a bunch of courses throughout Virginia, with early years of college, just from financial standpoint and et cetera, just to help me, and ranging from everything from mom and pops to semi-private to private in the state of Virginia. And my first internship was in 2003 at Westchester Country Club in Rye, New York. Being a small town guy from Southern Virginia, one stop sign town, graduated with X amount of people, yada yada yada. Tech was totally eye-opening. And then you go to Westchester, right outside of New York City, and experience things from a golf realm, where you went from riding everything. I've never even seen a walk mower before, right?
Yeah, it was triplex everything.
Yeah, it was triplex everything. And I never even seen a walk mower, and I had no clue about a lot of things. And, first day you get this mower, and, the beauty of Westchester and Papa Joe, that's what we call Joe DeLonzi, is, you didn't really take carts and trailers.
Wow.
You put your wheels on the mowers,
Yes.
and you trucked out.
I love it.
You had this loop, and you walked from the shop and you mowed your greens, and then you walked your mower back into the shop. And that's how it
Very
rolled.
old school.
Yeah, and it was great. And all of that was so eye-opening to me. And, what was really cool about my internship, outside of everything I learned, was with the Buick Classic, which at the time was one of the oldest standing events. There was some connection that I don't really remember truthfully, and I can't be honest about, but is Joe Alonzi, who was the soup director, had some relation with either Mark Spencer or Brad Owens with Augusta.
Okay.
So every year they sent 2 or 3 guys up to volunteer for the Buick Classic from Augusta National.
Excellent. Yeah.
So obviously, come on, Jack, you know me. I'm a Southern guy. Budweiser's my middle name.
Yeah.
And
You hook up with these guys.
right.
Yeah, no
they
doubt.
walk on property. They smell me from 3 miles away.
He's our man.
Right, that's our guy. And we hung out and we talked, and being Southern guys, and this was the summer of 2003, and I'll admit I was the last guy known to mankind to ever have a cell phone. And the summer passed after the event. We had a great time, and I remember rolling in after late August, after my internship at Westchester, and I rolled into my house, and my roommates were in there, and they all just looked at me. They're like, "You need to listen to the answer machine." How many people right now on this podcast remember answer machines,
Yeah,
right?
I barely do.
Right. I don't even know if it's in a vocabulary any longer for people.
I barely do.
So I remember I don't even know if I set my bags down, whatever. I pushed play, and I had a voicemail from Brad Owen, superintendent of Augusta National, saying that he heard a lot about me from the guys that came up and volunteered, and wanted to offer me an internship. And I went through all that. And
Now, were these were during summers of Virginia Tech, or?
yeah, they were in summers. So that was 2003. So in the fall of 2003 is when I got the call and blah, blah, blah. And
You started next May down there.
no, I took a whole year off of Virginia Tech and
Get out.
took a whole year off of school so I could be there from start to finish, through the Masters.
And you were there in April, of course.
Yep. I was, so I started, started on January 2nd. I literally partied in Blacksburg like it was my job for New Year's, and woke up and drove my 1986 Volvo 4.5 hours south on New Year's Day, and woke up on the 2nd, started my first day at Augusta National Golf Club.
Yeah. So Jan 2nd, 2004. See, that was almost 20 years ago. This is the sort of patience that I kind of want to get out in this conversation. You're a patient guy.
There's so many things about that year that I will never forget, and like what a lot of people don't, visually know about Augusta National. And I remember the summers and rolling around, and I literally had a boombox. And maybe I'm outdating myself, but I had a boombox bungee cord to the front of my cart.
Members aren't there. There's nobody on the golf course.
Nobody on the golf course.
Yes.
So after Mother's Day,
you can just party.
yeah. So the golf course closed. Well, yeah.
Maybe not just party, but at least bring out the boombox.
Oh, I partied. So the member after Mother's Day, the golf course is closed, right? So like, the whole summer proceeds, and we put the black liners that I always referred to them as mulch liners. They're the liners that go under mulch beds, the black liners. We lined all the bunkers, and so they're all black, and there was tents over 18 of the 27 greens on property, if you include the par 3, and there's no fairway, there's no tee.
It's wild, man.
Right, it's so nuts. Yeah, I graduated in 2004, and
after the year at Augusta.
right, and like I went and started interviewing, and I interviewed some great clubs, all across the United States, really, and didn't really want to leave the state, didn't really want to leave home, and I interviewed for like a couple of positions around Carolinas and Virginia and Maryland and et cetera, et cetera. And when they would ask, like, are there any other clubs you're looking at? And I said, well, Kinlock, and, oh, you got to go work for Pete.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
And, so that gave me my exposure to Pete Witt. And
so when Pete offered you the job, which was what job did you take? Assistant?
I was an
second
AIT.
assistant?
I was an AIT.
AIT.
Yep. And, and truth be told, and a lot of the Kinlock faithful will know the story, but I graduated in May, and the member guest was like the next weekend.
Okay.
So one of the contingents was, Josh, come, you can get the job and come work, like there's no time off, right? So like my first weekend at work at Kinlock Golf Club, #1 in the state of Virginia, and blah, 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 under Pete Went, was member guest. So I roll into the shop that morning, and Trevor Hedgepath, who's now the
super
at
of course,
hands me a Post-it note. And on the Post-it note says number 17. That's it.
That's it. Thank you.
So like, I'm like trying to think to myself and comprehend, and he's jabbering, and it's a pretty Hispanic workforce. So
yes,
majority of the morning meeting was in Spanish, which like I knew the basics like cerveza and hola and et cetera at the time. And so we take off, everybody goes off, and I had a radio because prior to welcome Josh, we're going in to start the crew, here's your radio.
Okay.
Blah, blah, blah,
and
blah.
here's number 17.
And here's a Post-it note that says number 17. So I immediately proceed to take the greens more. I'm mowing greens, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So like I immediately take the greens mower and drive straight to number 17 at Kinlock.
Okay, as you would.
Right. Like, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this is kind of weird. Like, why would I be mowing number 17 first?
Yeah.
You know, like, I had no idea. But and then, I proceeded to do the thing. Like, I took the mower off, I laid out the turning boards, started mowing the green. I was about halfway through, and I started hearing all this radio chatter of, where is this? Where is that? Where is the sixth mower? Because I was the sixth mower.
Oh, man.
And I kind of started picking up on it, and it was Pete over the radio. I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm excited to be a part of Lancaster. What's easy for me is just where we are agronomically and where we're going with that. And, I'm confident and love the fact that I have you guys in my back pocket. And happy to continue a relationship with Earthworks.
Well, there you have it. A great sit down and conversation with Josh Saunders of Lancaster Country Club for both Joel and I. And I have to let you know that Josh did continue that story about mowing the 17th green at Kinloch, and I had some technical difficulty in recording it. Let's just say the dog ate my homework. But it was Pete that was over the radio, and then it was Pete that showed up on the green while Josh was mowing, and it was a learning experience, right? It didn't happen again, that sort of thing. First day on the job. So a lot of fun to sit down and tell these stories. It has been such a blast to do these podcasts for the past year, and we really are looking forward to continuing. But not without saying thank you all so much for being a part of this. This large Earthworks community, this Earthworks family, all of us that employ some of the aspects of biological soil management, we're making a difference. We're making a difference in the way that people approach greenkeeping. Things are different than they used to be 20 years ago in terms of biological soil management, and it's all thanks to you guys. So we'll keep going forward. We're having a blast. This is fun. So thank you to all the loyal greenkeepers and groundskeepers and landscapers and growers of all type. Thank you to all the very generous folks out there that sell the Earthworks products and get out and talk to people about it. Thank you to the folks that are manufacturing these Earthworks products and everyone part of this greater Earthworks family. Thank you all so much. Please hit subscribe to these podcasts. Get on our YouTube channel. Check out the 2-Minute Turf Talk. Subscribe to that. It makes a big difference. We're all in this together, and it's a real fun time. So please reach out. Also, get on the Earthworks podcast. Maybe you have some suggestions of who you want to hear, or maybe you want to get on yourself. Give me a call. Give Joel a call. Give Kevin a call. Give Chad a call. Give Kirk a call. We're all here. Thanks a lot. So thanks for being a part of this. And check out next week and the week after that. We've got a couple of real good interviews in the can that you're all going to have a great time listening to. Thank you.